Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another edition, a bonus summer off-season edition of Stay Busy with Armon Sadler. I am your host, Armon Sadler, vegan chorizo poppy, founder of Ball Nigga Ballers, all that good stuff. Today I'm here to talk about a topic that um I've been I've been having a lot of thoughts about, and it was one of those things that if we were in season, I would want to talk about. And so it's like, let me just give you guys some content surrounding it. And because I also think that it aligns with things that we discuss on the podcast related to music. And so just to not bury the lead anymore, I'm talking about Ja Morant and his recent gun controversy. So for those not familiar, Ja Morant this past weekend was riding in the car with his friend. His friend was on Instagram Live. They were listening to NBA YoungBoy, and his friend turned the camera to Ja, and Ja pulled the gun out. His friend tried to turn the camera real quick, but people were able to screen record the video, get screenshots of it. It was all over social media, and Ja Morant was suspended from all Memphis Grizzlies activities. What those are during the summer, I'm not entirely sure. They just got eliminated from the playoffs by the Lakers. I'm sure they maybe they're practicing. I don't know. Like that's kind of beyond the point. But for Ja, this is another instance of him getting in trouble in the public eye, but also another thing related to guns. If you recall, throughout the season, a story came out where he got into a fight with a kid at a basketball court. And then he went to his house and pulled out a gun, like on his porch, just showed it off as someone was driving away. Then there was another instance where obviously he was in the club in Colorado, finally following a game against the Nuggets. He pulled out a gun there, was showing it off on his own Instagram Live. And then there have been other instances where he went to the mall to try to beat up a worker, I think at like Foot Action or Foot Locker, who was getting crazy with his mom, and another instance where his friends were shining beams on the Indiana Pacers bus or something like that. And it's just been continued misbehavior, quote unquote, for Ja Morant. And while I don't necessarily want to pile on him, I do think it's important that we hold him accountable. I do think it's important that we figure out what it is that is going on within him that makes him continue to do these things. Especially when he got on national TV and said, like, the gun wasn't mine when I was in the club, and I have to be more conscious of my behavior, and I'm going to be better. I'm going to try to fix my perception. But it's also the conversation surrounding it and how people are not necessarily willing to hold these celebrities, these athletes accountable because they do great things. I think one of the most frustrating things for me that I've observed is people doing these what about this person? What about this? Like, people were bringing up how the NBA was kind of highlighting Karl Malone during NBA All-Star weekend, which I think was completely wrong. Like, they shouldn't do that. He's done some pretty vile things himself. But I don't think that them not punishing Karl Malone like changes anything about the Ja Morant situation. Like, these are two very completely different things. Karl Malone is retired. And still, they just because he's retired doesn't mean like, oh, they're okay to highlight him. But Ja is currently in the league. He's currently one of the rising stars, if not one of the future faces of the league. And he's continuing to do these very wrong things. And one thing that's clear, whether athletes sign up for it or not, they are very impactful on the youth. You may not want to be a role model, but you inherently are a role model. Kids grow up and they want to be like you in terms of sports, but also the people who do great things in life outside of sports, like LeBron James and Chris Paul, and like everyone who's done things for their communities. Like, people look up to you in a variety of ways, and I think that's something that you have to be a lot more conscious of. And so it gets a little frustrating for me when I look at these situations and people get frustrated at people holding Ja accountable. And like, I'll kind of get a little more specific with it. Like, it sometimes seems like people put their koofies on a little too much, and they don't want black people to publicly hold other black people accountable when they do things wrong. In my perspective, I feel like it should be us to do it. I would rather someone that I'm, connected with in some way, someone who looks like me, someone who genuinely cares about me, hold me accountable as opposed to some white person I don't know who might have a preconceived notion and is just going to be punitive and not necessarily care about the rehabilitation. I think we all want to see Ja Morant think better, do better. Like he's touted as a very highly intelligent individual. He comes from a family of people who have loved and cared and supported him, and so it's just confusing figuring out what the issue is. And so I think that we all have a right to want to express ourselves and express our disappointment with what he's doing. He's got a very great opportunity. I think it's been said ad nauseum, so I don't need to remind him how much money he's making. Like, who am I? But it's just like it's terrible to see because you know if like this world is not forgiving. He was given the 8-game suspension and he went to the rehab center, whatever that was. I don't really think it achieved much. Now it's like, what's stopping them from, some people have said he should get suspended for the season. I don't know where I stand on that. I think that something needs to happen where it really gets through his head, like the things that he's doing can and will impact his career. Um, and when I think about the Ja Morant situation, and these are completely unrelated, all three different situations, but I think about Kyrie Irving, I think about Kanye West, I think about the controversies that they went through and how people were again doing the, oh, what about this person? Like when Kyrie was going through his stuff with his anti-Semitic comments, people are like, but Brett Favre is stealing money from people, and it's like Brett Favre is wrong. Brett Favre should get handled. But what Kyrie is doing, again, as someone who maybe he didn't want to sign up to be a role model, but he is a role model, and I think as as Black people who have encountered a lot, who have been disenfranchised, who have been mistreated, promoting something that is harmful to someone else is counterproductive and counterintuitive to what we're trying to do for ourselves. And I think a lot of people were defensive of Kyrie and his comments because they like him as a basketball player. He's an incredible player. I love that game 7 shot just as much as everyone else. As a LeBron fan who wanted to see the Warriors lose, I love that. But for me, it's not enough to be good at something to then for me to just ignore everything that you do. And I think these are regular conversations that we have, separating the art from the artist. We see it with the people who still listen to R. Kelly. We see it with the people who, Chris Brown. We see it with people who are still fans of the baby. There's a separating the art from the artist thing. And similar with Kanye. Kanye is a legend. Kanye has given us so much classic stuff throughout his career that when he was going through his anti-Semitic stuff, or even years ago with the Trump stuff and the MAGA hat and all that, you've got people telling me or telling other people like, man, forget all that, like he's Kanye, bro, like he's a legend, like every time he drops there's a celebration of his music. But it's like, this is someone who is influential, this is someone who people are looking up to, and you are doing wrong things in the public eye. And for me, it's like, I'm very supportive of calling out dumb niggas. Like that's just kind of how I operate. I'm very supportive of calling out dumb niggas when they do dumb shit. In my personal life, I don't coddle people who are repeat offenders. I don't make excuses for people who are repeat offenders. Do I think people deserve grace? Absolutely. Um, I I think that the intent to rehabilitate should be as important as the intent to hold someone accountable. We should try to get to the bottom of these things. But when someone shows you who they are and they do things over and over and over, it gets to a point where it's like, yo, man, like I'm not really in a place where I want to show grace. I'm not in a place where I'm willing to overlook something because they've got, they can make, crazy reverse layups and crazy dunks and they're great at basketball or they make great music. Like it's deeper than that for me. It's deeper as Black men. And I think that we really need to think about, how it can impact us. Like, I always try to put myself in people's shoes or think about if I had kids. Like people were getting on Michael Wilbon for saying like he didn't want to support Ja Morant and buy his shoes for his kids because of what he's doing. And I get that. I get that to an extent. Like you promoting that could come off a certain way. Like children are very impressionable. If my child sees me willingly buying the shoes of someone who's in the public eye for crazy stuff, you might think that's okay. And I'm not saying that's exactly how the scenario play out, but you really never know. Like me personally, I don't even want to leave that up to chance. And it kind of makes me think of the impact of music, and it makes me think of back in the day when people would say, Grand Theft Auto was so impressionable, it was influencing people to be violent and use guns. Like back then I was like, well, I play GTA, it's fun, I drive around, run people over, shoot people in the game, but it's never really encouraged me to do it in real life. But you don't know how someone else can take things, and I think hip hop music is very influential. It influences our fashion. It influences, how men engage with women, whether that's good or bad. It influences a lot of different things. And, I don't like that hip hop is often treated as the problem in these situations. And I don't think that it is the problem in these situations, but it is so important to always think about your impact. It's so important to always think about, you know, even if you weren't influenced by something, what you do could influence someone else. When you're in the public eye, you've got these followers, you got this verified check, you've got millions of people who support what you do. You are an influence, whether you like it or not. And so, I think that a lot of these conversations that we have surrounding these situations with celebrities, I think that we don't prioritize the responsibility that they have enough. Yes, I don't think that we should put them on pedestals per se, but the reality is like Ja Morant says something and I say something, like more people are going to hear Ja Morant. More people are likely to perhaps, agree with him or to do what he says. Like if Ja Morant puts out a GoFundMe, like he's just going to get more donations because he has more of a platform. And so I think we need to consider these people's platforms and how they use them. Um, because again, I get it. Like some of these people just want to hoop. They don't want to be role models. They don't want to be any of these things. But that is inherent, especially in this world that we live in. Think back to the pandemic when all these companies were it was coming out that these companies were racist, and a bunch of companies were doing their layoffs, and a lot of black people were getting fired or mistreated. Who were people begging to hear from? People were begging to hear statements from celebrities. And then they were dragging the celebrities who weren't doing the statements the proper way. And I was always like, I don't really care what Terry Crews thinks about this situation. I don't care what Doja Cat has to say about this situation. And obviously, Doja Cat's a different case because, at the time she was in those chat rooms showing feet, whatever. But, it's just like we go to these people who it's not even necessarily their job to try and change the policy within these companies or within these demographics or these industries, but because they have the platforms that they have, because in truth we'll follow a rapper before we follow a politician, we'll follow an athlete before we even care to know who certain politicians are. These people and their words matter. And so with that comes, all right, with great power, with great platform, with a following comes a certain responsibility. And so again, while I don't necessarily want to pile on Ja, while I do think that, we need to, and not we, it's not my job, but him and, and his people, his family need to figure out what the issue is. I do think us in how we discuss these situations, we really have to think about the impact, not just within the short term. Like, people aren't trying to bully him. Like, at the end of the day, like people may make their beds and people have to lay in them. And I think Ja's incredibly talented. I would like to see him succeed in this league. And right now, the trajectory that he is on, it's a pretty concerning one. So yeah, I think that's really what I wanted to get out of this conversation is there's so many layers to this. Obviously it starts with Ja, it extends out to his friends and his family. And it's funny too, a lot of people talk about the people that he's surrounding himself with and whether they're influencing him, but it's like, maybe it's him influencing them. Like at the end of the day, his friend was just on IG live singing a song. Like his friend, it clearly didn't seem like he knew he was going to pull a gun out, and he tried to look out for him by putting the camera away. I think while our environments do influence us, we can also influence our environments. And so, I don't necessarily like that it's always the fingers are always pointed to the people around him. Do I think that he could use some better people around him? Probably. But I think it also starts with him too. And so I think there are just many different angles of this that we need to consider. And I think that we need to have a bit more responsible discourse on this. And I think people need to stop being contrarians and, again, stop like putting their koofies on for every single thing. Like I love my people. I will defend my people to the death. I want to see the best for my people. And in wanting to see the best for my people, I also know when my people need to be held accountable. I don't think that I'm judge and jury for these situations. I don't think that we're judge and jury for these situations either. But at the end of the day, like we can't just blindly support and think that they're being wronged when they're clearly doing things that they shouldn't be doing things that are unbecoming of someone who represents a professional league, unbecoming of someone who represents our community, unbecoming of someone who is inherently a role model to the youth. Like there's a certain aspects of this that for me I can't blindly defend or support just because we're we're the same, we're part of the same community. Like that's just my personal thing. So of course, I'm always open to having these conversations with people and seeing what you all's perspective is. But again, I really want us to think about this and just and outside of Ja too, within music, within all of entertainment, within just ourselves as people. Like you really have to consider your impact. J. Cole said it in, I think it was 1985. Have you ever thought about your impact? Like you really got to think about your impact. And I think these celebrities get to points where they feel like they're invincible. You make great music, you're funny, you're popular, women like you, like you can't do any wrong. And we've seen time and time again like that's not the case. So that's all I've got for this Ja Morant situation. I really do want to see it work out the best way that it can for him. But I'm also going to hold him to the fire. That's I feel like that's my job, but that's also just how I am as a person. I'm happy to give grace, but you do something once, that's just an occurrence. You do something multiple times, it's a habit, it's a behavior, it's a decision that you're making. And if you make a decision that could potentially have some negative results, then you kind of have to live with that. And so, I think that he's going to have to live with this. He's really going to have to dig deep and think about, what he wants his life to be, what he wants his impact to be, and things that he can do to change his circumstances. And so, we'll see what can unfold from there. But for now, yeah, this is my stance, and again, I'm more than open to talking to anyone about it. And so this is a stay busy bonus off season, summer, whatever you want to call it, episode discussing Ja Morant, discussing the responsibility of these public figures, and how it relates to, other public figures within music and entertainment, and how we as people can support one another and love one another while also rightfully holding each other accountable and not doing but what about this? What about that? What about that? Like, I just think that we need to look at these situations better and ultimately be better. And so that's that. I'll talk to you listeners soon. Stay safe, stay humble, stay busy. Baby girl,